While the toy makers of Merton churned out the unloved Sten, furniture makers in the home counties were occupied with a thing of real beauty.
There was a whole workforce of carpenters, woodworkers, who weren't really being utilised in the same way that all the metal workers were.
There was a scarcity of materials, a scarcity of expertise, huge pressure to deliver something which answered specifications which had never been achieved before by mankind. That's why design is the opposite of art. When you're engaged in design which is involving industrial production, you are given constraints and there's always a clock ticking. But I think that those constraints energise the design process. It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Incredible.
What a machine, eh?
Wow.
Edward Barber and J. Osgoby run one of Britain's leading contemporary design companies. Today, they've come to see a groundbreaking piece of aviation history. One which rewrote the rule book.
The fastest aircraft from 1941 to 45, faster than your Spitfire now even.
The Mosquito was known famously as the Wooden Wonder, a very high-speed, twin-engined aircraft that would be unarmed. It would be an unarmed light bomber. And the reason it was unarmed was to keep weight down, but it would fly so fast and so high that it could whiz off to Berlin, bomb the Germans, and whiz back without being intercepted by German fighters.
If you tap that, you feel it's all wood, timber.
It was the first truly dynamic, ultra-high-speed, modern warplane made of wood.
The finest piece of furniture this country's ever built.
Flying furniture.
The Mosquito was the brainchild of the de Havilland Aircraft Company. Made almost entirely from plywood, it used a minimal amount of the metal that was more urgently needed for munitions, and brought an otherwise redundant industry to the front line of wartime production.
While I wouldn't like to say that anybody could build a Mosquito, its construction is very widely dispersed.
It's a single wing right through the fuselage, so it's not like a lot of aircraft where you put two individual wings on, like the Spitfire.
Yeah.
It's a single wing right through, which gives it a lot more of its strength.
Yeah.
Many furniture and other woodworking factories, large and small, have been turned over to the job.
There are only 4 bolts which hold the fuselage and wing together, and that's one of them.
That's really incredible. I mean, that just looks like something you'd put up some shelves up with.
If it's to be furniture or mosquitoes, Britain, for the time being, prefers mosquitoes.
Here we go.
Oh, wow, it's a bit tight in here.
How's it going up here, Captain? It's really, really cool.
The Mosquito was an ingenious and effective design solution to the shortage of strategic material.
Oh, it's pretty flimsy, isn't it?
But without the obsessive tenacity of its designers, it would never have taken off.
What's that for? That must be the throttle.
The Air Ministry wasn't really impressed with the Mosquito when Geoffrey de Havilland took it, to the boffins at the Ministry. When the first one flew in 1940, there's a wonderful film that you can see of the first plane flying. Actually, it's taking off for the very, very first time, this Wooden Wonder. And you can see the Air Ministry buffs and the RAF top brass looking at it, virtually their hats being blown off, saying, gosh, old de Havilland was right after all.
Versatile, reliable, and astonishingly quick, the Mosquito was adapted for use as a reconnaissance, fighter, and bomber plane. It traveled at over 400 miles per hour, much faster than the larger bombers, but delivered a payload comparable to the Flying Fortress, consumed less fuel, and used fewer crew. Over 7,000 Mosquitoes were built, and it ended the war with the lowest loss rate of any Allied bomber. Not bad for a design project that the experts dismissed as sheer madness.
Sometimes I think being an industrial designer gives you the ability to put forward ideas which might be ridiculed. So the idea of proposing a wooden plane that's based on one wing with things fitted to it might have seemed frankly ridiculous, and I think that's what it was deemed to be ridiculous by the Ministry of Defence at the time, but it provided firsts, design firsts. We're today very familiar with the idea of composite construction. This plane was built in exactly that way, with thin layers of plywood with balsa wood in between. But not only that, we just found out that it was the first stealth plane that was almost invisible to enemy radar because it was made of wood.